I am Brandon, 31 years old, and last month I buried my newborn daughter Lily, alone in the rain. She lived just 3 days before a heart defect took her from us. While I watched her tiny casket lower into the ground, my parents were at my brother Ethan's pool party celebrating his promotion. My mother's words still echo, "It is just a baby. Your brother's party matters more." They had no idea what I would do next. If you are watching from somewhere that has experienced family betrayal, hit subscribe and stay with me through this painful journey that changed everything. Before my world shattered, I had what most would consider a good life. I worked as an architect at a respected firm in Boston, designing spaces where families would build memories while ironically struggling with my own family dynamics for years. My wife Sophie and I met during our sophomore year at university, both of us studying in the library late one night. She spilled coffee on my blueprints, and instead of being angry, I found myself captivated by her genuine apology and bright blue eyes. We dated through college, married 5 years ago, and had been excited to finally become parents after establishing our careers. The contrast between my brother Ethan and me could not have been more stark. At 27, Ethan still lived with our parents in their suburban home, working part-time at an electronics store with no ambition beyond weekend parties and the latest video games. My parents Margaret and Richard never seemed to notice or care about his lack of direction. Instead, they celebrated his every minor achievement, as if he had discovered the cure for cancer. Throughout my life, I had grown accustomed to my accomplishments being overshadowed by Ethan's trivial needs. When I graduated with honors from architecture school, my parents arrived an hour late because Ethan needed help moving his television to a friend's house. When I received my first major design award, they skipped the ceremony entirely because Ethan had tickets to a concert he wanted them to attend. The pattern was so predictable that my colleagues often expressed more pride in my achievements than my own family. Despite this imbalance, Sophie and I were overjoyed when we discovered she was pregnant. I still remember the moment she showed me the positive test, her hands trembling with excitement. We waited until the 12-week mark to share the news with our families. Sophie's parents responded with tears of joy and immediate offers of support. My parents nodded politely before quickly changing the subject to Ethan's new gaming console. The pregnancy journey brought Sophie and me closer than ever. We attended every appointment together, holding hands as we heard our baby's heartbeat for the first time. The gender reveal was a private moment between us, a small cake with pink filling that made Sophie cry happy tears. We chose the name Lily Grace after my grandmother, who had shown me the love my parents never could. We transformed our spare bedroom into a nursery, painting the walls a soft mint green and assembling the crib together on a Sunday afternoon. I installed a window seat where Sophie planned to nurse our daughter while looking out at the garden we had planted. Everything felt perfect, like we were finally creating the family I had always wanted. But Sophie's pregnancy became difficult during the 3rd trimester. Her blood pressure rose to concerning levels, and at 35 weeks her doctor recommended an emergency delivery. The hours that followed were terrifying. Sophie endured 22 hours of labor before our tiny daughter arrived, weighing just 5 pounds 3 ounces. Despite her small size, Lily was perfect. Wispy blonde hair, tiny button nose, and fingers that wrapped tightly around mine when I held her. Those first 24 hours were filled with cautious joy, as we took turns holding her, counting her fingers and toes, and marveling at the miracle we had created. On the 2nd day, a nurse noticed Lily seemed unusually lethargic and called for the pediatrician. Tests revealed what would destroy our world. Our daughter had a complex congenital heart defect that had gone undetected during prenatal screenings. The doctors explained that she would need immediate surgery, but her tiny body might not survive the procedure. I will never forget the helplessness of watching medical professionals rush our daughter away, Sophie's anguished screams echoing through the hospital corridor. We sat in the waiting room for 6 agonizing hours, clinging to each other as if we might drown separately. When the surgeon finally appeared, his expression told us everything before he spoke a single word. Lily had survived the surgery, but her heart was too weak. The doctor gently explained that all they could do now was make her comfortable. We spent that final night in the hospital room, taking turns holding her, memorizing every feature of her face, whispering promises and apologies as monitors beeped in the background. At dawn on her 3rd day of life, Lily took her final breath in our arms. Sophie collapsed immediately. her body unable to process the magnitude of our loss. Hospital staff had to sedate her, and she was admitted to the psychiatric unit for observation due to concerns about her suicidal thoughts. Just like that, in less than a week, I had become a father and lost my child while my wife battled her own demons in a hospital bed down the hall. I sat alone in the hospital cafeteria, trembling as I called my parents to tell them their granddaughter had died. With Sophie hospitalized for her emotional breakdown, the burden of arranging Lily's funeral fell entirely on my shoulders. I moved through the tasks like a ghost, selecting a casket so small it could have been mistaken for a jewelry box, choosing readings for a service that should never have been necessary, and picking out a burial outfit for my daughter who never got to wear the dozens of cute outfits hanging in her closet at home. When I called my parents to inform them of Lily's death, their initial response seemed appropriate. My mother gasped and said all the expected things about being sorry for our loss. My father cleared his throat the way he always did when uncomfortable and asked about Sophie. They promised to be there for us and said they would arrive the day before the funeral to help with arrangements. That night I returned to the empty apartment surrounded by baby items we would never use. I sat in the nursery rocking chair clutching the teddy bear we had planned to give Lily, and allowed myself to truly break down for the first time. The next morning I forced myself to function again, meeting with the funeral director to finalize details for the service scheduled for Friday. On Wednesday evening, just 2 days before the funeral, my phone rang. It was my brother Ethan, his voice animated with excitement about getting a minor promotion at his part-time job. He was planning a pool party at our parents' house on Friday afternoon to celebrate. I remember staring at the wall, wondering if this was some kind of sick joke. My brother planning a celebration on the day we would bury his niece. Before I could respond, Ethan mentioned casually that our parents would be hosting and wanted to know if I would be attending. When I reminded him that Friday was Lily's funeral, he paused only briefly before saying, "Oh, right, that sucks. But you understand. This promotion is a big deal for me, right? Assistant manager is a huge step up." I hung up without responding, assuming my parents would obviously choose their granddaughter's funeral over a pool party. An hour later, my mother called. Her voice had that special tone she always used when she was about to disappoint me, but wanted to avoid taking responsibility. "Brandon, honey, about Friday. Your father and I have been talking, and we think it might be best if we stay here for Ethan's celebration. This promotion is really important to him, and he needs our support." I sat down my knees, suddenly unable to support my weight. "Mom, my daughter, your granddaughter, died. We are burying her on Friday. How can you even consider not being there?" "Now, Brandon," she replied in that condescending tone. "I had heard throughout my childhood. I know you are upset, but this is Ethan's big moment. It is just a baby. Your brother's party matters more. You can always have another child, but Ethan needs to know we support his career progress." The phone nearly slipped from my hand. "A career progress," I choked out. "He stocks shelves at an electronics store part-time. Lily was a human being who died. Your grandchild." "Do not be dramatic," my mother sighed. "You are always so sensitive. Sophie is not even attending the funeral from what you told us. So why does it matter if we are there? We will visit when things settle down." After hanging up, I stood in the middle of our living room, surrounded by sympathy cards and flower arrangements, feeling something shift permanently inside me. In that moment, the last thread of hope that my parents might ever be the people I needed them to be snapped completely. I could not bear to tell Sophie about my parents' decision. Her fragile emotional state would not withstand another blow. Instead, I told the hospital staff that my parents were unable to attend due to health reasons. A lie that felt bitter on my tongue but necessary to protect my wife. Friends stepped up in ways I never expected. My colleague Martin helped me select readings for the service. My college roommate flew in from Chicago to be there. Sophie's parents arrived devastated by their granddaughter's death, but steadfast in their support. They sat with Sophie in the hospital when I needed to finalize funeral arrangements, holding her hand and validating her grief in ways my own parents refused to do. The morning of the funeral arrived with appropriately gloomy weather. Rain poured from a steel-gray sky. As I stood in our bedroom struggling to button my shirt with trembling fingers, Sophie remained sedated in the hospital, her doctors advising against her attendance for fear it would trigger another breakdown. I kissed her forehead before leaving, promising to represent us both. At the cemetery, about 20 people gathered under a small tent. Friends, colleagues, Sophie's family. The absence of my parents created a void that everyone politely avoided mentioning. As the minister spoke words of comfort that felt hollow, I stood alone at the front, a tiny white casket before me containing all the hopes and dreams we had for our daughter. When it came time to place flowers on her casket, my hands shook so badly that Sophie's father had to help me. The final prayer finished and people began to disperse, offering awkward hugs and promises to check on me later. I remained rooted in place, unable to leave my daughter alone in the rain. After everyone had gone, I sat on the wet ground beside the small mound of dirt, uncaring about the mud, soaking through my suit pants. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A notification from social media. Without thinking, I opened it to find photos from Ethan's pool party. There were my parents smiling broadly, my mother in a floral swimsuit holding a cocktail, while my father flipped burgers on the grill. Ethan posed with his arms around two friends, a banner, reading, "Congratulations, assistant manager," hanging above the pool. They were celebrating while I buried my child alone. The disconnect was so profound that it felt like looking at a scene from an alternate reality. I shut off my phone, placed it on Lily's grave, and wept until I had no tears left. The days following Lily's funeral blurred together in a haze of grief and numbness. Each morning, I would wake up reaching for Sophie before remembering she was still in the hospital. The empty nursery door remained closed. Neither of us ready to face dismantling the room we had created with such hope. A week after the funeral, Sophie was released from psychiatric care, with a diagnosis of severe depression and a prescription for medication that made her eyes vacant and her movements slow. Her parents stayed with us, cooking meals neither of us could eat, and fielding the well-intentioned but often painful visits from friends. I attempted to contact my parents the Sunday after the funeral. My father answered, his tone casual, as if nothing significant had happened. "We were wondering when you would call," he said. "Your mother wants to know how Sophie is doing." "How do you think she is doing?" I responded, my voice tight. "Our daughter died, and you both chose a pool party over her funeral." My father sighed heavily. "Brandon, you need to stop dwelling on this. What is done is done." Ethan's party was a success, by the way. His manager even stopped by. "Dad, do you understand what you did? Do you have any concept of how your actions affected me?" "You are overreacting," he replied. "Your mother and I have discussed it, and we think you are using this situation to create drama. When you have calmed down, we expect an apology for your attitude." Before I could respond, I heard Ethan's voice in the background. My father put him on the phone. "Bro, you need to chill," Ethan said, munching loudly on something. "It was just a baby who lived for 3 days. It is not like you guys had time to get attached. Meanwhile, I've been working toward this promotion for months." I hung up the phone and hurled it across the room, shattering a framed photo of our family from Christmas the previous year. Sophie's father found me sitting among the broken glass, helped me clean up, and poured me a drink without comment. As Sophie slowly emerged from the fog of medication, the strain on our marriage became evident. We moved around each other like ghosts, unable to connect through our individual pain. At night, I would hear her crying in the bathroom, the sound of running water, failing to mask her sobs. When I tried to comfort her, she would pull away, unable to bear being touched. The contrast between Sophie's parents' support and my own family's callousness only emphasized the depth of the betrayal. Her mother sat with Sophie for hours, looking through the few photos we had of Lily, acknowledging her existence and her loss. Her father fixed things around our apartment and took me out for drinks, allowing me to talk or remain silent as needed. My anger and resentment grew with each passing day. Nightmares plagued my sleep, dreams where I was running through hospital corridors, hearing Lily cry but unable to find her. I would wake gasping for air, my heart pounding so hard I feared it might stop. At work, I stared blankly at blueprints, unable to focus on designs for family homes that now seemed like cruel reminders of what I had lost. The first hint that my parents were rewriting history came from my cousin Rachel, who called to ask why I had prevented my parents from attending Lily's funeral. According to the story they were spreading throughout the extended family, I had told them they were not welcome at the service because I blamed them for some unspecified aspect of Lily's death. That is absolutely false, I told Rachel, my voice shaking with fury. They chose not to come because they attended Ethan's pool party instead. They told me, and I quote, "It is just a baby. Your brother's party matters more." Rachel's shocked silence spoke volumes. She apologized for believing their version and promised to set the record straight with other family members. The knowledge that my parents were not only unrepentant but actively villainizing me added a new dimension to my pain. As November approached, bringing with it the Thanksgiving holiday, my parents began calling daily, leaving voicemails about their expectation that Sophie and I would attend the family gathering to move past this unfortunate situation. Each message increased the pressure in my chest, a building rage that threatened to consume me. Sophie, now more present but still fragile, was adamant. "I will never set foot in their house again. They do not deserve to know me or any future children we might have." The mention of future children opened a wound we had both been carefully avoiding. The doctors had assured us that Sophie could physically have more children, but the emotional scars of losing Lily made that possibility seem both distant and terrifying. After much internal debate, I decided to attend Thanksgiving alone, not to make peace, but to finally confront my parents with the full weight of their betrayal in front of the extended family they had been lying to. The night before, I rehearsed what I would say during the hour-long drive, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. Sophie watched me prepare to leave with worried eyes. "Are you sure about this? They do not deserve your presence." "This is not for them," I replied, straightening my tie. "This is for me. And for Lily. I need to stand up for our daughter one last time before I cut them out of our lives completely." As I drove to my parents' suburban home, memories of childhood disappointments played through my mind like a sad film reel. Always being second best to Ethan. Always having my achievements minimized. Always making excuses for their behavior to friends who could not understand why my parents missed important events. I realized that their choice to skip Lily's funeral was not an aberration, but the culmination of a lifetime pattern that I had normalized. For the first time, I felt not just grief and anger, but a clarity that would guide my next actions and ultimately change the course of my life. I arrived at my parents' house just as other family members were pulling into the driveway. The familiar colonial-style home was decorated with autumn wreaths and pumpkins, creating a picture-perfect holiday scene that felt like a mockery of the turmoil inside me. My Aunt Patricia embraced me immediately, whispering condolences about Lily that sounded genuine. Uncle Robert, my father's brother, clasped my shoulder firmly and asked how I was holding up with sincere concern. Inside, the house smelled of roasting turkey and pumpkin pie scents that had once represented comfort but now turned my stomach. My mother spotted me from the kitchen doorway and hurried over, her face arranged in a practiced expression of sympathy. "Brandon, sweetheart, we are so glad you came," she said, attempting to hug me. I stepped back, maintaining distance. Her smile faltered only momentarily before she continued. "Where is Sophie?" Still not feeling up to socializing. "Sophie will never set foot in this house again," I replied quietly. "She is spending Thanksgiving with her parents who actually supported us when our daughter died." My mother's eyes narrowed slightly before she recovered her hostess demeanor. "Well, we all grieve differently. Come say hello to everyone. Ethan just got a new car with his raise. He is showing everyone pictures." Sure enough, my brother was holding court in the living room, surrounded by relatives, examining his phone. He glanced up, nodded at me without interrupting his story about leather seats and premium sound systems, then continued as if I were a minor acquaintance rather than a brother who had just lost a child. My father emerged from his study, drink in hand. "Son," he acknowledged with a nod. No hug, no mention of Lily, no acknowledgement of the funeral they had missed just weeks ago. Just son, as if nothing had changed. Dinner was served with the typical holiday fanfare. 20 family members squeezed around the extended dining table, and overflow card tables. I sat silently as conversations about football, Christmas plans, and workplace gossip swirled around me. No one at my end of the table mentioned Lily directly, though I caught pitying glances from cousins who quickly looked away when I met their eyes. The breaking point came during dessert. My mother, passing around pumpkin pie, smiled brightly at me and said, "Brandon, when you have kids someday, you will have to bring them for Thanksgiving. Family traditions are so important." The room did not immediately go silent. Conversations trailed off gradually as people realized what she had said and its implications. I set down my fork with deliberate slowness. "When I have kids someday," I repeated, my voice carrying across the now quiet table. "Mom, I had a child. Her name was Lily Grace. She died 3 weeks ago." My mother's smile became fixed. "You know what I meant, Brandon. In the future, when you and Sophie start a family properly." Start a family properly. The words hung in the air between us. Lily was our daughter. She lived for 3 days. She had blonde hair and my nose, and Sophie's chin. She was a person who had a funeral that you and Dad skipped to attend Ethan's pool party. Several relatives gasped. My cousin Rachel spoke up. "Wait, you actually chose a pool party over your granddaughter's funeral? I thought there must have been some misunderstanding when Brandon told me." My father set his glass down heavily. "This is not the time or place for this discussion, Brandon. When would be a better time, Dad? When were you planning to acknowledge that you chose Ethan's assistant manager promotion over your dead granddaughter? Or were you going to continue telling everyone I somehow prevented you from coming?" My Aunt Patricia looked between my parents with horror. "Richard, Margaret, tell me this is not true. You could not possibly have missed your grandbaby's funeral for a party." Before my parents could respond, Ethan interrupted. "Oh my God, can we not do this again? It was just a stupid funeral. My party was important to me, and they were being supportive parents." The table erupted. Uncle Robert stood up, his napkin falling to the floor. "Just a stupid funeral. That was your niece." "Ethan." My mother tried to regain control of the situation. "Everyone needs to calm down. Brandon is exaggerating as usual. We had valid reasons for not attending." "Valid reasons," I laughed, a hollow sound that surprised even me. "Mom, you told me, and I will never forget these words. It is just a baby. Your brother's party matters more. You can always have another child. Tell me, in what world are those valid reasons?" Cousin Mike shook his head in disgust. "Aunt Margaret, that is monstrous." My father slammed his hand on the table, making the dishes rattle. "That is enough. Brandon has always been jealous of his brother. He is twisting what happened to gain sympathy." Jealous, I stood up now, unable to remain seated. I spent my entire life making excuses for why my parents missed every important event. High school graduation, Ethan had a cold. College honors ceremony, Ethan needed help with his apartment. My architectural award, Ethan had concert tickets. I normalized it all, because that is what children of neglectful parents do. But missing my daughter's funeral, that is where I draw the line. Uncle Robert moved to stand beside me. "Richard, I have watched this dynamic for years and said nothing but this is beyond the pale. That baby was your flesh and blood." My father's face reddened. "Do not tell me how to run my family, Robert. Brandon has always been difficult, always demanded too much attention." Ethan rolled his eyes dramatically. "Your drama is ruining my holiday, bro. Some of us want to enjoy Thanksgiving without your pity party." The room fell silent at his callousness. Then my cousin Sarah, who had been quiet until now, stood up. "I just had a baby 3 months ago. I cannot imagine losing her, let alone having my family abandon me when I did. What you did was unforgivable." One by one, family members began to voice their shock and disapproval. My parents, unaccustomed to having their behavior questioned, grew increasingly defensive. My mother began to cry performative tears while my father's anger escalated. "If you cannot get over this and move forward as a family, then perhaps you are not welcome in this family anymore." Brandon, my father, finally declared, his voice cutting through the chaos. The ultimatum hung in the air, and I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. I was part of this family for 31 years, constantly trying to earn love that should have been freely given. I do not need to be part of it anymore. Lily deserved grandparents who would acknowledge her existence, who would mourn her loss, who would show up when it mattered. You failed her, just like you failed me countless times before. I placed my napkin on the table and walked toward the door. My father called after me. If you walk out now, there will be consequences, Brandon. The family business, your inheritance, all of it. I turned back one last time. Keep it all. I would rather have nothing than continue pretending this is what family should be. To my surprise, Uncle Robert, Aunt Patricia, and several cousins stood up and followed me out. In the driveway, Uncle Robert embraced me properly. I should have said something years ago, son. Your parents have always treated you unfairly, but this is beyond anything I could have imagined. Whatever you need, we are here. Driving home, the gravity of what had just occurred hit me fully. I pulled over on a quiet side street and finally released the sobs I had been suppressing throughout the confrontation. It was both an ending and a beginning. The death of the relationship I had always hoped to have with my parents, and the birth of a new understanding of what family truly meant. December arrived with cheerful holiday decorations that felt like knives to my heart. Sophie and I had planned to celebrate Lily's first Christmas with matching family pajamas and a special ornament to mark the occasion. Instead, we avoided shopping malls with their Santa displays and muted Christmas commercials featuring happy families. Our marriage strained under the weight of shared grief experienced separately. Sophie had returned to therapy 3 times a week, but declined my offers to attend couples counseling. I can barely handle my own feelings, she explained one night. I cannot take on yours too. The distance between us grew a chasm of pain too wide to bridge. 2 weeks before Christmas, Sophie announced she needed space and would be staying with her parents through the holidays. I look at you and see Lily, she whispered as she packed her suitcase. I see the family we were supposed to be, and it hurts too much. I did not fight her decision, understanding the need to escape the apartment that held too many reminders. The day she left, I stood in the doorway of the nursery for the first time since Lily's death, unable to cross the threshold into the room with its mint green walls and empty crib. Work provided no refuge. My concentration lapsed during important client meetings, designs remained incomplete, and deadlines passed unmet. My boss, though sympathetic, eventually called me into his office mid-December. Brandon, take a paid leave until February, he said kindly but firmly. You are going through something no one should have to experience. The firm supports you, but you need time to heal before you can function professionally again. With both my wife and job temporarily gone, I spent days alone in our apartment. The silence broken only by occasional calls from Sophie's parents checking on me or friends offering to visit. Invitations I routinely declined. Christmas cards arrived daily. Most senders unaware of our loss. Their family photos and cheerful updates, like salt in an open wound. My parents attempted contact through various family members, their messages evolving from demands for an apology to thinly veiled threats. My father had my cousin Jeffrey inform me that I would be removed from the family will if I did not come to my senses by the new year. The inheritance that might once have mattered now seemed meaningless compared to what I had already lost. On New Year's Eve, while the rest of the world prepared to celebrate, I hit rock bottom. Surrounded by takeout containers and unwashed laundry, I found myself staring at the bottle of sleeping pills Sophie had left behind, calculating how many it would take to end the pain permanently. The thought terrified me enough to call the crisis hotline number my therapist had provided weeks earlier. The counselor who answered talked me through the immediate darkness and helped me make a safety plan for the night. As I hung up, my phone rang again almost immediately. Uncle Robert calling to check in. I was thinking about you today, Brandon, he said without preamble. How are you holding up? Something about his timing broke the dam I had built around my emotions. I told him everything. Sophie leaving my job situation, the depth of my grief, and the dark thoughts that had nearly overwhelmed me that night. I am coming over, he said immediately. Do not argue. I will be there in 30 minutes. True to his word, Uncle Robert arrived, bearing groceries and a determined expression. He cleaned my kitchen while I showered for the first time in days, then cooked a proper meal and sat across from me at the table until I ate every bite. Over coffee, he shared something I had never known. My parents' pattern of behavior extended far beyond their treatment of me. "Your father has always been this way," Uncle Robert explained. "Our own parents favored him, and he learned to expect preferential treatment. When he married your mother, who shares the same tendencies, they reinforced each other's worst qualities." He revealed that Ethan had already drained significant portions of my parents' retirement savings with failed business ventures they had funded without question. "They enable him because he makes them feel needed and important. You were always too independent, too capable. They could not control you the way they control him." Uncle Robert's perspective offered something I desperately needed: the understanding that my parents' behavior reflected their deficiencies, not mine. "You did not lose real parents at that Thanksgiving confrontation, Brandon. You lost the illusion that they could ever be the parents you deserved." Before leaving, Uncle Robert made me promise to call my therapist in the morning and consider attending a grief support group he had found specifically for parents who had lost infants. "You do not need your parents' approval to build a meaningful life," he said at the door. "Lily would want you to honor her by living well." His words stayed with me through the night, and the next morning, January 1st, I called my therapist and scheduled an emergency session. Dr. Winters listened as I recounted the events since our last appointment, then offered a perspective that would fundamentally change my approach to healing. "Brandon, what you are experiencing is complicated grief, exacerbated by family betrayal trauma," she explained. "The normal grieving process for your daughter has been compounded by the secondary loss of your family support system at the moment you needed it most." For the first time, I had a framework for understanding the complexity of my pain. It was not just about losing Lily, but about the shattering of my entire understanding of family in the aftermath. Dr. Winters suggested a structured approach to healing: regular therapy sessions, medication to help manage my depression symptoms, and gradually addressing the physical reminders of Lily in our home. That weekend, with Dr. Winters present for support, I finally entered the nursery. Each item represented a future now lost. The rocking chair where we would have read bedtime stories, the changing table we had assembled, with such care the mobile of stars and moons that would never spin above our daughter's curious eyes. With gentle guidance, I selected a few precious items to keep. Lily's first and only outfit, a knitted blanket made by Sophie's grandmother, the handprint card created by a thoughtful nurse during Lily's brief life. These would become part of a memory box, rather than painful daily reminders. As January progressed, I began attending the support group Uncle Robert had recommended. Sitting in a circle with other parents who had experienced similar losses, I found something I had been desperately missing: people who truly understood. They did not offer platitudes or expect me to move on. They simply witnessed my pain and shared their own. Through their stories, I learned that many had also experienced family disappointments following their losses, though none quite as extreme as my parents' behavior. One father described how creating a memorial garden had helped him process his grief, an idea that resonated deeply with me. In our apartment's small balcony space, I began planning a container garden dedicated to Lily, plants that would bloom in spring around the time she should have been marking her first milestones. The act of nurturing living things became therapeutic, a way to channel love that had nowhere else to go. By mid-January, Sophie and I were communicating more regularly by phone. Though still staying with her parents, she expressed interest in seeing the changes I had made to the apartment and the memorial garden plans. Her voice sounded stronger, more present than it had in months. "Maybe we could look at the memory box together when you visit," I suggested cautiously. "Only if you feel ready." "I think I would like that," she replied. "I have been working on something too. A journal of letters to Lily. My therapist suggested it might help." That small conversation represented the first green shoot of hope in our relationship, a sign that while we might never be the same, we could potentially find a way forward together. By April, 6 months after Lily's death, significant changes had taken place in my life. Sophie had moved back home in February, and while our relationship remained fragile, we had established new patterns of communication and support. Joint therapy sessions focused on grieving as a couple helped us understand how differently we each processed our loss. Our apartment had transformed as well. The nursery was now a peaceful space, with a comfortable reading chair, bookshelves, and a small memorial area for Lily with her photo and memory box. Sophie used the room for her writing, and I would sometimes sit there in the evenings feeling close to our daughter without being overwhelmed by grief. At work, I had returned with renewed focus and purpose. Architecture had always been about creating spaces for life to unfold, and now, my designs incorporated subtle elements of memorial and remembrance. My boss recognized the depth this added to my work and assigned me to lead a project designing a children's hospital wing, a challenge I embraced with both professional skill and personal understanding. My parents' attempts to regain control escalated as they realized I was rebuilding my life without them. Their tactics ranged from guilt. "We are getting older, and you will regret this estrangement," to flying monkeys. "Your cousin Jeffrey's wedding is coming up, and the family will be incomplete without you," to outright threats about my diminishing inheritance. When they learned Sophie had moved back home, my mother left voicemails suggesting that now that things are settling down, we should all get together and put this unfortunate misunderstanding behind us. Her refusal to acknowledge the magnitude of their betrayal only reinforced my decision to maintain firm boundaries. The most significant change came from a suggestion by someone in my support group. Alan, who had lost his son to SIDS 2 years earlier, had found purpose by volunteering with an organization that supported parents during infant loss. "Helping others through what you have survived gives meaning to the pain," he explained. Sophie and I began attending events for bereaved parents, sharing our experience and listening to others. We were surprised to discover how many had stories of family abandonment or insensitivity following their losses. "People expect you to get over it quickly when a baby dies," one mother told us. "They do not understand that you are not just grieving the days you had, but all the future you had imagined." This shared understanding led to the idea that would eventually become Lily's legacy. We decided to establish a small foundation in her name, focused initially on providing memory boxes to hospitals for parents experiencing infant loss. Each box would contain items we had found meaningful: a journal, a disposable camera for capturing memories, information about grief resources, and a soft blanket for holding during the difficult days ahead. As word of our initiative spread through support groups and social media, donations began arriving from unexpected sources. Several of my relatives, including Uncle Robert and Aunt Patricia, made generous contributions. Friends organized fundraising events. Sophie's writing skills proved valuable as she crafted compassionate materials to include in the boxes. Meanwhile, Ethan's latest drama unfolded predictably. He had been arrested for DUI after crashing his new car into a storefront, causing significant property damage. My mother called in May, her voice strained but entitled. "Brandon, your brother, is in a bit of trouble. The legal fees are substantial, and we were hoping you could contribute. Family helps family in times of need." The irony was so profound I nearly laughed. "Is that so, Mom? Where was that family commitment when we buried Lily?" "You are still dwelling on that. This is an emergency, Brandon. Ethan could face jail time." "Ethan made his choices," I replied calmly. "Just as you and Dad made yours. I suggest you look into public defenders." My mother's tone shifted instantly from pleading to cold. "You have become a very selfish person, Brandon. Your father and I are disappointed in how you have changed." "I have not changed, Mom. I have finally stopped accepting treatment I never deserved. Please do not call again unless you are ready to truly acknowledge what you did and make amends." 2 weeks later, my parents escalated their attempts to force contact by showing up unannounced at my workplace. The receptionist, aware of my family situation, immediately called security while alerting me to their presence. I arrived in the lobby to find my father demanding to see me while my mother created a scene about being kept from her son. Security personnel approached, respectfully but firmly. "Sir, Madam, if you have not been invited to the premises, we need to escort you out." My father pointed at me accusingly. "There he is, Brandon. Tell these men who we are." I addressed the security officers directly. "These people are not welcome to contact me. Please escort them from the building." My mother's face crumpled in disbelief. "You would have us removed like common trespassers. We are your parents. You forfeited that role when you chose a pool party over your granddaughter's funeral, I replied quietly. Please do not come to my workplace again. As they were escorted out, my colleagues witnessed the entire exchange. Rather than judgment or uncomfortable questions, I received unexpected support. My boss put his hand on my shoulder and simply said, "Healthy boundaries are necessary sometimes. Take the rest of the day if you need it." That evening, I received calls from several family members who had begun distancing themselves from my parents after learning the truth at Thanksgiving. Cousin Rachel reported that my parents had been telling increasingly outlandish stories about me, claiming I had mental health issues and had threatened them. Uncle Robert confirmed that many in the extended family had seen through these lies and were privately supporting my decision to cut contact. What had begun as a painful fracture in the family was evolving into something unexpected, a realignment based on authentic relationships rather than obligation. I found myself surrounded by a chosen family of supportive relatives, friends, and fellow bereaved parents who offered genuine connection without manipulation or conditions. By summer, Lily's foundation had grown beyond our initial expectations. What began as a small memorial project expanded to include funding for hospital bereavement training, support group facilitation, and eventually a modest research grant for congenital heart defect prevention. Sophie and I found purpose in transforming our pain into support for others walking the same difficult path. The foundation's first official fundraising gala coincided with what would have been Lily's first birthday. Local media covered the event, interviewing us about the foundation's mission and the importance of supporting grieving parents. The story ran on the evening news and in the city newspaper, complete with photos of Sophie and me standing beside Lily's portrait at the event. 3 days later, I received a text message from Ethan. "Saw you on the news. Mom and Dad saw it too. They are freaking out that you are getting attention for this. Dad smashed the television. Just thought you should know they are still nuts." It was the first time my brother had contacted me since Thanksgiving, and possibly the first time he had ever shared information that was not self-serving. I considered not responding, but finally texted back, "Thanks for letting me know." His reply came quickly. "Whatever. Not taking sides. Just thought it was kind of messed up how they reacted to you doing something good." It was hardly an apology or acknowledgement of his own role in the betrayal, but it suggested that perhaps even Ethan had moments of clarity about our parents' dysfunction. I did not pursue further conversation, recognizing that he remained entangled in their toxic system in ways I had finally escaped. The revenge, if it could be called, that was not something I had consciously planned. It came naturally through living well, through finding meaning in tragedy, and through refusing to participate any longer in the dysfunctional family dynamics. My parents had to watch from a distance as I built a life of purpose and integrity without their approval or involvement. Perhaps the most powerful statement I could make about their irrelevance to my healing journey. October arrived again, marking 1 year since Lily's brief life and death. Sophie and I planned a memorial service that reflected how far we had come in our grief journey. Unlike the funeral, which had been shadowed by my parents' absence and Sophie's hospitalization, this gathering felt like a true celebration of Lily's impact. We held the service in a garden where we had sponsored a small memorial bench with Lily's name. Friends, supportive family members, and people we had met through the foundation gathered to share memories and reflections. Sophie read a poem she had written, her voice steady and clear. I spoke about how our daughter's 3 days of life had ultimately changed thousands of lives through the foundation's work. The most significant change in our lives had come just 2 months earlier when Sophie discovered she was pregnant again. The news brought complicated emotions, intense joy mingled with fear and guilt. Our medical team developed a comprehensive plan with extra monitoring and testing to detect any potential heart issues early. Every appointment brought anxiety, but also cautious hope. At the memorial service, Sophie placed a hand over her small baby bump as she laid flowers on Lily's bench. "Your little brother or sister will know all about you," she promised. "You will always be our firstborn, our beautiful Lily." The path to this new pregnancy had not been smooth. Months of therapy, both individual and as a couple, had helped us work through the terror of potentially experiencing another loss. We had discussed adoption as an alternative, researched genetic testing, and spent countless hours deciding if we were emotionally ready to try again. When the 20-week scan revealed we were having a boy with a healthy heart, we both wept in the ultrasound room. We decided to name him Robert after the uncle who had stood by me when my parents failed to. As my relationship with Sophie strengthened through this new journey, my estrangement from my parents solidified into a permanent reality. They had learned about Sophie's pregnancy through family gossip and immediately attempted to reinsert themselves into our lives, sending baby gifts that we returned unopened and leaving messages about grandparents' rights that we ignored. Sophie's mother called me one evening concerned. "Your mother cornered me at the supermarket today, demanding information about the baby and when they could visit after he is born." "What did you tell her?" I asked, immediately tense. "I told her that she and Richard lost the privilege of being grandparents when they chose to skip Lily's funeral, and that Sophie and I would never allow them to hurt you both again." My mother-in-law's fierce protection moved me deeply. When Robert was born in February, healthy, loud, and perfect, we were surrounded by true family. Sophie's parents, Uncle Robert and Aunt Patricia, and close friends created a circle of support that proved family is defined by love and presence, not blood alone. My parents' attempt to visit the hospital was intercepted by security, whom we had alerted in advance about potential unwanted visitors. They sent a demanding email afterward, claiming we were cruel to keep them from their grandson and threatening legal action, threats that our lawyer assured us were groundless given their established pattern of disinterest in Lily. The foundation continued to grow, eventually funding a specialized pediatric cardiac research position at the university hospital. At the announcement ceremony, I shared our family story publicly for the first time, not to shame my parents, but to highlight how support systems matter profoundly during loss and how their absence compounds grief. As Robert reached his developmental milestones, first smile, first laugh, sitting up, we celebrated each one with awareness of how precious these moments were. The nursery, once Lily's and now Robert's, contained subtle tributes to his sister, a butterfly mobile similar to her stars and moons, a small framed footprint card beside his crib, a children's book about a big sister in heaven. With each passing month, I found greater peace with my decision to remove my parents from our lives. Therapy had helped me understand that grieving the parents I wished I had was necessary before I could fully accept the reality of the parents I actually had. Dr. Winters called it ambiguous loss, mourning a relationship that technically still existed but would never provide what I needed. 1 year after Robert's birth, we planned a foundation gala that coincided with his first birthday celebration. The event had grown significantly, now attracting corporate sponsors and prominent medical professionals. Sophie and I stood at the podium together to announce a new initiative funding counseling services specifically for siblings and grandparents of infants who had died, addressing the ripple effects of loss throughout families. As guests mingled during the reception, the event coordinator approached nervously. "Mr. Brandon, your parents are at the entrance requesting to be admitted. They say they have tickets, but they are not on the guest list." Sophie gripped my hand, her expression concerned. "What do you want to do?" After a moment's consideration, I walked to the entrance myself. My parents stood there in formal attire, my mother clutching a designer handbag, my father with the impatient expression he always wore when made to wait. "Brandon," my mother stepped forward, "we bought tickets to support your charity. Surely you cannot turn away paying donors." I looked at them both, feeling strangely calm. "This foundation exists because you were not there when we buried Lily. You were not there when we needed family most. You do not get to appear now and pretend to support her legacy for social credit." My father's face reddened. "Now see here, we have made mistakes, but we are still your parents. We have a right to be part of our grandson's life. Rights are earned through reliability and love," I replied. "You were not there when we buried her. You do not get to be part of how we honor her." The security team stood nearby, waiting for my signal. I shook my head. "Please refund their ticket purchase and escort them out." As they were led away, my mother called out, "This is not over, Brandon." But it was over. I returned to Sophie, Robert, and our true family, the people who had supported us through our darkest days and celebrated our healing with genuine joy. That night, after guests had departed, and Robert was asleep in his crib, Sophie and I sat on our balcony among Lily's memorial garden, now lush with flowers that would soon bloom again on her birthday. "Do you ever regret cutting them off completely?" Sophie asked gently, for Robert's sake. I considered the question carefully. I regret that Robert will not know his biological grandparents, but I do not regret protecting him from people who could not be there for his sister. Tragedy reveals character Sophie. It showed us who truly deserved to be in our lives. The foundation work continues to grow, touching thousands of families navigating infant loss. Each memory box includes a card with Lily's story and the message that grief deserves acknowledgement, that every life matters regardless of its length, and that finding purpose after loss is possible. I often think about how different things might have been if my parents had simply shown up that rainy day at the cemetery. Their choice revealed a truth I had spent decades avoiding: that some family relationships cannot be fixed through effort or forgiveness alone. Sometimes the healthiest choice is to invest your love where it will be valued and returned. Lily lived just 3 days, but her impact continues to ripple outward through the lives we touch through her foundation. In the end, her short life taught me more about love, family, and resilience than my parents managed to teach me in 31 years. If you have experienced family betrayal during your darkest moments, know that you are not alone. Finding your true family, whether blood-related or chosen, is perhaps the most healing journey you can undertake. Have you ever had to make difficult decisions about toxic family relationships? Share your experience in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please subscribe to hear more stories of healing and transformation. Thank you for witnessing our journey, and may you find peace in your own.